I'm a completionist, meaning that whenever I start a game, I have to finish it and complete any challenge, get every reward. Because of this, I've noticed a lot of creepy things in video games. An example of this is in Legend of Zelda 2. You know that guy in one of the towns, the one who says, "I am error"? Well, if you leave that town and pace back and forth twice, and then get into 2 battles in specific areas, for about 5 seconds, the words "error controls you" will appear on screen. Every creepy Easter egg or glitch I would ever see couldn't prepare me for a game that I would get in the future. About 3 months ago, I took a week-long vacation to New York. My brother, who lives in Manhattan, offered to let me stay there so I wouldn't have to buy a hotel room. Basically, the entire week it was just me wandering throughout New York while my brother was at work. The only time I really saw him was in the morning or at night. On my last day in New York, however, my brother had the day off of work. We had planned to spend the day in New York City, but it was downpouring, so we just stayed inside and hung out. Later on in the day, he brought out our old N64 with all of our old favorite games. We played classics like GoldenEye and Mario Kart, and lesser-known games like Spider-Man and Raid 2 Rumble Boxing. We played all night long and finally went to bed at 1 o'clock. The next morning, I packed up my stuff and headed home. Realizing how much fun I had, on my way home, I decided I was going to buy an N64. I got back to my apartment around 2 p.m. and got settled in. Once I was all set, I grabbed $30 and went to my local retro games / comic book store, comically speaking. I bought an N64 for $25 and went back to my apartment. I immediately opened up the box the system came in and took out my new system. It was painted gold and it was awesome. Then I took out the games that came with it: GoldenEye, Rave Racer 64, 1080 snowboarding, and a game I had never heard of called Dreamer N64. The cover was a man in a straight jacket, floating on balloons. He had a weird, somewhat creepy expression on his face. He had a smile that stretched across his face. He had pitched white skin, dark circles around his eyes. He looked mentally insane. The cover creeped me out, so I put the cartridge face sitting down on the floor. I hooked up the system and got ready to play. I was originally going to play Wave Racer 64, but then I caught a glimpse of Dreamer in the corner of my eye. I wondered what the game was about and put Wave Racer down. I picked up Dreamer and put it into my system. It was sort of like I was hypnotized, because I didn't want to play it. However, when the N64 logo appeared, my completionist side kicked in and I got ready to play the mysterious game. The title screen was just a blue sky with clouds all around. Then the man from the cover floated up on balloons. I got a chill down my spine. He looked at the screen and a muffled sound came up. The only words I could make out were "welcome" and "dream on." The rest sounded like white noise, but I could tell it was saying something. After that, the word "dreamer" appeared. It looked like a first grader wrote it with crayons. Then, in a blinking red, at the bottom it said, "press start." I did, and a loud piano key played. The man gave me a weird look, and then all of his balloons popped. He started falling and screaming, and right before he hit the ground, the screen faded to black. I sat there in silence, staring at the black screen for about a minute. Then finally it stopped. The black faded into a bedroom where the man was sleeping. He woke up and was violently shaking. He then sat up, got out of bed, and stared at the screen. Again, a muffled sound came out, except it was a bit easier to understand this time. I could tell the man was taking I could tell the man was talking this time, and that he had a British accent. I could make out that he said, "Nothing much, just had a bad dream. Just a bad dream." The rest sounded like white noise. The man sort of looked like a clay model. He then paused and just stared at the camera for a good 15 seconds. Then once again the muffled sound came up. This time it was hard to hear. I could barely make out this. I didn't much sleep, tired. The man then crawled into his bed and fell asleep. The screen faded to black, and then the controls flashed on screen. Then it said, "Level 1, get ready," and it faded into a field. There were flowers everywhere, and the sky was blue. Butterflies were flying everywhere. Then there was the man. On the other side of the screen, an arm popped out of the straitjacket. The arm was wrinkly, bony. It was holding a net. Soon a paragraph came up on the screen, explaining that the point of the game was to catch as many butterflies as you can within 1 minute. In the first level, you have to catch a minimum of 10 butterflies to win. Seemed simple enough, so I pressed A and then I was able to start. The game was somewhat of a side-scroller because you could only go in one direction, forward. The game was incredibly easy, and I collected 25 butterflies. Time ran out and another muffled sound came up. It said, "You win," and the screen faded to black. Once again, I was in the man's bedroom and he woke up. He looked at the screen and I couldn't understand what he said, other than, "Finally, dream." Then he stared once again, then white noise blared through the screen and the man fell asleep. I was brought back by how loud it was. Then it said level 2. It was exactly the same as level 1, except I had to collect 20 butterflies. The same exact thing happened every level, gradually increasing how many butterflies I had to catch. After the 4th level, I seriously contemplated to stop playing. Ignoring my completion aside, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. I was so bored, I cursed being a completionist. The man woke up once again, except the game glitched out. A screech blared through the TV as the man started to sort of glitch all over the place, and then he went over to the screen. The screech stopped and he just stared. The room turned black as just the man stared at me. His pupils rolled into his head and his smile turned into a scowl. Words flashed on the screen asking, "Do you wish to continue?" I chose yes, and white noise blared again. Then it said, "Level 5, prepare or perish." The man once again was in the field, holding the net. Now the handle was covered in spikes. A tear ran down the man's face, blood trickled down his hand. There was now a 30-second time limit, but I had to catch only 10 butterflies. I noticed in the field that the flowers withered and music was playing. It sounded somewhat like a broken jack-in-the-box. I started the level and it was a huge jump from the last few levels. It was almost impossible. I was only able to catch 2 butterflies. The time ran out and the screen went black. I heard a scream. An image flashed on the screen for about 2 seconds. I could see that it was a man holding a torch. The screen went into a room. It was dim, only being lit by a dying light bulb. The walls were gray, and I could see a small table that had a knife, a drill, and a syringe. The man woke up and he looked at the screen and cried. A man walked in. He was wearing a shirt that had bloodstains all over it. He said something, but all I could hear was, "Test subject 402, dangerous, kill, careful." The man with the bloody shirt grabbed the syringe and jabbed it into the man's neck. They never said his name, so I just call him Subject 402 based off of what the other man said. The man started crying and then he fell asleep. He was in the field again. The sky was cloudy and gray. There were also no flowers. I had 20 seconds and I had to collect 15 butterflies this time. Subject 402 was bleeding and walking instead of running. It was literally impossible. I couldn't beat the level. Time ran out and the screen cut to black. It was hard to hear, but I think it sounded like a man begging for mercy. The words Level 7 Y showed up on the screen. There was a 10-second time limit. I had to collect 90 butterflies. The game was literally impossible at this point. The grass was gone, the butterflies were all black, and Subject 402 was just shambling, and then crawling. He was dripping blood. The screen cut to black again, and the words, Final Level, Revenge is Needed. This level was completely different. Subject 402 was chasing the man. I had to catch up to him before the time ran out. I did, and once again, the screen faded to black. It then went into the room. The man had his neck slit and was on the floor gasping for air. Subject 402 woke up. He looked at his hands and cried. One hand was a drill and the other hand was missing fingers and was distorted. He then killed himself with the drill hand. The screen then froze, then went into static. Words were displayed on screen. Congratulations, you win. I was horrified, and I haven't played my N64 since then. The next day I talked to my friend who has worked with Nintendo for 15 years. I went to his house. He was doing some character design for the next Mario game. I asked him if he had ever heard of the game Dreamer 64. He stopped drawing and gave me a very confused look. He asked me how I knew about it, and I told him it came with my system. He almost jumped out of his chair. According to him, Dreamer 64 was supposed to be a kid's game for the N64. However, one day early in development, the creator of the game had a mental breakdown and went missing. His team was able to complete the 4th level, but then gave up because of lack of inspiration and budget problems. He then showed me a picture of the creator. He was Subject 402. I had heard rumors of this game's existence on various gaming sites and message boards, but I never thought it was actually real. I spent a little over a year trying to track down a copy, but I always came up empty-handed. That was until a few weeks ago, when the game decided to find me. I'm here to beg you, do not go looking for it. If an unfamiliar game shows up at your door, leave it be. It can disguise itself under any platform and does not abide by the rules of our universe. If you are unfortunate enough to play it, I will provide instructions below to hopefully give you a fighting chance. The game decides to present itself to me on a Sunday, 12 o'clock a.m. It had manifested itself into a blank N64 cartridge with no writing or sticker logo, and was placed outside my front door with no note or instruction. I paced around for 20 minutes and tried to comprehend where it had came from and who delivered it. Eventually I hooked up my console and inserted the cartridge. My version of the game had titled itself Halloween 64 and included an inverted N64 logo. It also displayed a few presumably non-existent dev companies like Uology Inc. and Last Breath Software. So, the title screen includes the words Halloween 64, press start, in text made to look like a cheesy green smile. As soon as the game begins, you will be unable to quit until it's completed. I'm sure you're thinking, just turn it off, unplug it, or walk away. If only it was that simple. The game has several methods of self-defense, and the harder you try and disrupt it, the stronger it becomes. The power function of the console will not respond if you try to turn it off. The red power light remains on and the system operates like normal. The cartridge cannot be removed. It does not matter how hard you pull, it will stay locked in place. If you annoy it enough, the cartridge will become scalding hot and burn your skin to the bone. In addition to this, all outside communication will be lost. Your phone and internet will not function while the game is running. Any doors or windows that lead to the outside world will become inaccessible. My front door wouldn't open, and all of my windows became shatterproof. To be honest, I'm not even sure if time even passed while playing the game, as every clock in my apartment remained at midnight while playing. You are given 10 lives. Certain aspects in the game will be mirrored in reality. Any pets you own will die as soon as you lose a life. As you lose more lives, you will get sick. Very, very sick. I, for instance, became nauseous. My head started to pound, and my nose began to bleed. The more lives you lose, the worse you will feel, but you must keep playing. I can only conclude that losing all lives will result in death. Level 1. The Neighborhood. Your third-person character in Level 1 is a child dressed in a skeleton costume, carrying a jack-o'-lantern bucket. You start off in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, covered in cheap Halloween decor. The street had a striking resemblance to the one I grew up on. I can only assume this is a detail that is different for each player. Although the street appears linear and endless, it is not. As you move forward, the street lights behind you will go out. Do not go into the dark. Keep moving. If you move your character into the dark, you will lose a life, and as you play, you will notice the darkness creeping behind you in reality. After a few hours of running down the virtual street, all of the lights in my apartment went out one by one. Whatever you hear, see, or feel, it is very important to not take your eyes off the screen during this level. You will hear doors in your home open and close, footsteps, and a familiar voice whispering in your ear. Do not lose concentration, or you will lose more lives. You may even feel a hand rest on your shoulder. Eventually, the level will end without notice. The timer on the screen showed that I ran for 7 hours and 26 minutes before completion. Level 2. The House. Level 2 is displayed in first person. You will enter a house with limited visibility, as a dim flashlight is your only source of illumination. As you progress through this level, you will notice a difference in temperature around you. My apartment was freezing, making it extremely difficult to concentrate. Again though, you must keep playing. If you get up and try to adjust your thermostat or get a coat, you will lose a life. I lost 4 lives during this level and started coughing up blood. As you move through the house, you will discover various weapons. When you recover all of these weapons, you can progress to level. It is best not to equip them, as your character will only use them to commit suicide, thus resulting in the loss of more lives. As you move through the dark house, you will hear and see things that will test your limits as a human being. I will not go into detail, but I saw and heard things in the game that were deeply personal, disturbing, and worst of all, genuine. Be prepared to witness every terrible experience of your past. All of those things you have repressed, forgotten, and maybe even went to therapy to try to work through. Once again, you must keep playing, and you must collect every weapon. Level 3. Final. This one, like the last, is in first person. I entered this level with 2 remaining lives, almost certain that I was destined to fail, like the former levels. I believe that it is custom tailored to the person who is playing. You will enter a bedroom and see a person lying on a bed, asleep. They may resemble a loved one, a friend, or yourself. I saw the body of my best friend who passed away 10 years ago. You will have access to every weapon you grabbed in level 2. A knife, blowtorch, baseball bat, and a screwdriver. Your objective is simple. Kill the person in the bed. They will not fight back. Once their health bars diminish, you will win the game. I chose the knife. I walked up to the bed, aimed, and struck the body with the blade. White hot pain filled my eyes, and I instantly discovered the catch of level 3. Whatever pain you inflict on the person, you will feel in reality. You won't lose blood, nor will you lose consciousness, and you will not die, but you will feel every single sensation. If you take too long in between blows, your player will lose a life. The person on the bed will beg you to stop. They will scream your name again and again. It took me 20 minutes to stab them to death, and I could barely hold the control when it was over. I completed it with just one life remaining. My body was cold, frail, and broken. I remember reading Game Complete on the screen just before blacking out. I'm not sure who the game will choose next, or if it already has chosen. I just pray that they will read this before it's too late. Glitches can kill your game if you use them right, or, wrong. Either way, performing a certain glitch can lead to somewhere you don't need to be. Do another glitch there and be somewhere else. Make a glitch chain, and it's like running in the dark. You'll keep running blindly until you hit a wall hard. This is a story of how I encountered these glitches, and what happened after I performed them. I'm not going to bore you with the details of my life, since it's not important whatsoever. I'm just going to tell you that I love seeing how games work and how hectic and twisted they become when glitches happen. It's like splattering paint on a car in the junkyard. Really. But enough about it. Why am I here? I'll tell you what happened with a game that I've been glitching. I believe you've heard of Super Mario 64. Why, with a game like that, there has to be some crazy fun glitches, right? Right. There are. And it can get creepy. I plopped in my hard copy of Super Mario 64 into my PN64, a portable N64 that I helped build with my friend, so, that I could access the game anytime, anywhere. Everything was normal. Mario said his usual, "It's-a me, Mario!" and his face appeared. I pressed start and selected File A, my 119 star file. The only star I don't have is the Wall Kicks Will Work star, which I delayed for 1 star and eventually forgot all about it and beat the game without it. I started on the castle grounds, and I headed over to the hillside to climb to the top of the castle. I figured I can start there with something. Glitching, you see, is like baking a cake. Trying different ways or ingredients can change how it will turn out, so try everything. I record some parts, but with a lousy camera, it fails me and constantly needs to be charged, and needs to be handled in a specific way to work, and sometimes it just doesn't work at all. After climbing to the top, I figured why not mess with the door's warping code. I decided to pull off the death door glitch. I thought about something after my camera failed, though. Corner glitching is popular, so I long jumped and triple jumped my way through a nearby corner, one inside the castle through the outside. Then I made it through, and then I started failing. Then I made it through, and then I started falling. I then landed on a blank ground, then took full damage. Mario was about to die, so I paused the game and saved it on contact. Then I decided to screw it all up by resetting while it saved. I was brought back to the title screen, but it was all black. The music played, but I couldn't start the game. I restarted it again, same result. Oh crap, did I break it? I said. I turned the game off altogether and headed over to my friend's house. because we had built a special N64 coder where we put an N64 cartridge in and transfer the files to a computer. We looked at the code and decided to remove and replace the entire tile screen altogether, as well as remove some code. While looking into the code, however, we saw something. We found that the anti-dev had files used for fixing the game when something goes wrong, for example, glitches. What we found, however, was startling. When we opened it, we found two files, glitchfix.zip and reversefix.zip. Glitchfix.zip contained a complicated binary file, nothing much more. Reversefix.zip, however, contained 4 binary code files, 3 text files, and a picture file containing this picture. Our laptop then froze with this on screen, and minutes later went blue screen. The screen was supposed to appear when the game was to take a massive code-breaking glitch or hack. I somehow changed the game's code with the def door, corner lapse, insta-def save resetting glitch. We got the tile screen to work with everything about distorted and glitched. I went ahead to File A. I respawned at the castle grounds. Everything normal. I looked for anything wrong, but everything was there. The roof was normal, the doors were there, the cannons were there, the lake and moat were normal. I told myself to perform the def door corner lapse glitch this time, without saving and saving. I performed it flawlessly. After all was done, something went wrong. I spawned in the Bomb battlefield, with the Bowser fight happening there, in the middle of the field. Yeah, the game broke. Anyways, I had all the freedom I wanted this time when I fought him, and I decided to run while he slowly follows me. Why not see if he'd meet the Bomb King? That'd be another great glitch. After 30 minutes of making him follow, the Bomb King was there, waiting. I led Bowser there when I was in the Bomb King's text, and then Bowser attacked and killed me. I watched as Mario fell and died as the screen didn't go black. The Bomb King threw Bowser off the mountain afterwards, then I got the reverse fix.zip screen. My PN64 then started to grow hot, really hot. As the gears inside turned fast and loudly, smoke started to build eventually, and it wouldn't let me turn the game off, so I was forced to keep it running. Many noises came from the speaker, such as low and high-pitched wails, like noises telling me the audio was horrifically destroyed by this. It got so hot I dropped it, as the smoke kept blowing out of the system. I went to go get a fire extinguisher and a rag just in case a fire started, but by the time I got back, a small one had happened. It spread quickly. I was yelping and shot the machine with the extinguisher. It was put out, but $700 worth of material used to make the thing was ruined. I got angry and started cursing. After my episode, I checked out how bad it was damaged. It was shocking. Everything had melted. The inside of the cartridge was also melted. What scared me a bit, however, was the cartridge's face. The cartridge cover was melted to look somewhat similar to the reversefix.zip def screen. I tossed the PN64 and headed back over to my friend's house. Well, at least that's what I did the next day. The N64 scanner did surprisingly transfer the data from the cartridge, but only about half the cartridge's original data. The data was also corrupt, about 9/10 of it. What happened after we transferred the data? The computer ran like mad, and then pulled up a photo of an angered Mario. What the heck is this? A message to not download copyrighted content. Why the heck is this of all things here? I was confused, angry, and disappointed. The next event shocked me again. My friend spoke up. "I never knew," he said. "What?" I said back. I never knew that when I gave you this." "Knew what?" My voice higher in tone. This is a legal copy. Someone hacked it. I never knew that when I gave this to you. It had this. The computer started to run, and once again it produced smoke. This wasn't an ordinary hacked illegal copy. It was the worst virus to ever exist. The computer started to run, and once again produced smoke. This wasn't an ordinary hacked illegal copy. It was the worst virus to ever exist. The computer started to melt slowly, and a little got caught in my friend's hand. He screamed, shouted, and yelled, and cried as the machine melted in his hand. I ran to get cold water and tried to pull his finger out of the metallic goo. It was extremely hot. He was screaming. He banged his head into the wall as he tried to pull his hand out. His nose bled worse and worse with each bang. I eventually pulled his hand out to find that it melted deep into his hand. Tissue opened blood vessels and even bone. I rushed him to the hospital and he underwent surgery. I found out later that night that the metal fumes and everything from that laptop had damaged his hand badly. They found that the metal and all had entered his bloodstream. He didn't live another hour since I was told that. I went back home, depressed and ready to prepare a funeral. It made me so angry and sad that suicide filled my body. Before I could contact all my friends and his friends and family, I got a text message from an unknown number from 605-270-7774. When translated, this said, System Corruption 64. When I was a child, one of my favorite games was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Anyone who's played it can probably figure out why, even if they don't particularly find it their favorite. Naturally, as a very popular game, it spawned a lot of rumors and legends, especially back in the day when communication through the internet wasn't as common. Most of these legends are false, but sometimes a surprising amount of truth can be found in them. So a while ago, I had read an article about early versions of Zelda 3D, as it was called in development. And apparently, these early versions were incredibly different from the released version. It was modeled after the original Legend of Zelda, rather than A Link to the Past, and as such was a lot more free-roaming and adventurous than the one we got. At the time, it sounded awesome, and I even found myself wondering why they had abandoned the project. I concluded that it was probably due to technical requirements of such a feat. Still, one thing that especially stuck with me were the pictures. Some were nondescriptive, nothing special, but one showed a large, expansive desert environment. There was a palm tree and a small oasis near a much more primitive-looking Link, as well as some enemies. Past that, however, was just sand, stretching to the horizon. The thoughts of what might lay beyond that desert seemed to stick with the image into my mind. After that, we skipped several years. The article was only a vague recollection, nothing important. I was hanging out at the local GameStop with one of my friends. He's telling me about his day and tells me how some guy came to sell his missing son's old video games. He showed me them, and they were all normal games. A few Wii games, a few GameCube games, and a lot of Nintendo 64 games. Still, the only one that really caught my eye was a red cartridge with no label, except a piece of tape with the word Zelda written over it in marker. Naturally, this got me curious. My friend didn't share my curiosity, but he didn't think he could sell the game and just let me take it home for free and indulge myself. Naturally, I did. The moment the game started, I realized it wasn't the Zelda I was used to. The title screen was nothing but a non-descriptive The Legend of Zelda. No subtitles, no fancy font, no music. Just those words in black bordered lettering. The background wasn't from Ocarina of Time, or Majora's Mask either. It was an overhead view of what could have only be called ancient ruins. They looked very sinister and grotesque, similar to something from Majora's Mask, only without any hint of the mystical atmosphere that accompanied any Zelda game. They were simply unnerving. Still, this didn't stop my curiosity, it only kept me going. As soon as I press start, the game begins. It skips over any file screens and dumps a blocky-looking Link into an empty black environment. When I say black, I mean black. There was nothing separating ground and sky, just blackness. The only thing that let me notice that the game even worked was a temple in the distance, similar to the one in the opening. Moving still seemed to work fine, suggesting that something probably glitched with the textures of the ground and sky. Still, it seemed strange that nothing happened to any other textures. Entering the temple was my only choice, so I took it. One thing that is worth mentioning is that the game started with no music, just deathly silence. However, the closer you came to the temple, the more music was available. Well, it wasn't really music. It sounded like moaning, similar to the redeads in Ocarina of Time, but tinny and badly recorded. Every once in a while, some sobs could be heard, but they were quickly snuffed. Entering the temple made everything seem more like a Zelda game, but something caught my eye. Rather than the textures being worse than those in Ocarina of Time, they were better. There was more detail in everything, but it was all dingy and rotten looking. Extra polygons only served to make things look more grotesque. The random blood splatters didn't help anything, either. It didn't take long for me to realize that the entire dungeon could hardly be called Zelda-like. Puzzles usually only consist of pulling a lever or pressing a switch. In fact, there weren't even any sliding blocks. There were no enemies either, but the blood splatters on the walls soon served to be warnings of booby traps. Some become inescapable and simply send you back to the darkness again. Others are escapable, but still extremely creepy and depressing. The dungeon was riddled with the low-poly remains of dead adventurers, and sometimes they even had items on them. The items could be picked up, but the inventory screen seemed unfinished. And the game only auto-equipped the first 3 items picked up since there was no accessible inventory screen. After several gruesome deaths and retries, I find my way to a door, marked with a scratched-on eye, similar to the ones on the Lens of Truth and various other objects. Entering the store revealed a boss battle. The music by this point had changed, and I only realized it by the last room. The moaning had never looped once, but still seemed to change according to the mood. A dissonant violin melody started playing, but the rest of the sound remained nothing but moans, sobs, yells, and weird scratching. It was never enough to rise past the level of background noise, but it still remained unnerving, almost as if it wasn't music at all, but monsters that were wandering somewhere in the temple. When I said entering the room revealed the boss battle, I wasn't entirely honest. It could only be called the boss battle by the most gratuitous standards. It could only be called a boss battle by the most generous standards. It featured an empty room with the same textures on the walls as the rest of the temple. The only out-of-place aspect was a giant face on the other side of the room, colored as gray as the walls surrounding it. Its skin seemed stretched over its head and lined with the wall, so it looked as if the wall was growing a face. Moss seemed to be growing over its closed eyes, and cracks were apparent everywhere in it. Still, the door I came in was locked, and the only thing to do was approach. I did so carefully, making sure nothing was waiting for a surprise attack. I went up to the point where I was nearly in contact with the face. Nothing. It was still there, with its sunken eyes and cracked lips. I attacked it with my sword. The sword went through and made an incredibly vulgar flesh-ripping sound. But nothing happened. It remained there. I attacked some more, and still more. Until eventually the music stopped. Soon, the canopy of the violin music became even louder, and the moans started up even stronger. And then something happened. In one movement, its eyes opened, staring at me with its dry, soulless eyeballs. And then nothing. The music was still louder, but I continued to attack the face with no reaction until it simply had enough, ripped it to shreds, and fell away in a fire. In typical Zelda fashion, revealing a door. The music had stopped. There was no more moans, screams, anything. I whipped through the door. What a fool I was. That was only the tutorial. The screen was replaced by a white screen, followed by a moment of extremely loud brownie noise. I jumped, but it was over almost instantly. The white screen was replaced by endless desert, the one from the image. I was in shock. By that point, I was creeped out enough to turn the game off. Still, that reprise didn't last long. I had nightmares of the game. Normal nightmares, nothing weird about them. It was, after all, a pretty creepy game. However, what frightened me the most was something I skimmed over while I played and realized afterwards. The game changed each time I started over. When I tried to take the same path through the labyrinth, I always ended up lost and confused. By the time I finished, I was relying on instinct. I kept going the next day, stopping only to eat and go to the bathroom. When I turned it on, I was still at the desert, even though there was no file screen. This time it was night. I walked. Sometimes I would walk for 20 minutes, only to find a half-sunken obelisk, or the ruins of what looked like some village hut. Other times, there would be a skull or a few bones, but nothing more noticeable than that. Other times, I would see great expanses of oasis and tropical forest. I found my first enemies here. They were similar to the Techites, only with larger bodies, mostly containing their large eye. They had thin, long legs and would still attack by leaping. Only when they hit you, they would pin you to the ground and attack. Soon the sun rose, and I continued walking. Sometimes I would find small tombs. These were almost always similar in style to the first dungeon, only without the moaning and no bosses. What I did find was information. Runes scribbled onto the walls I could read. The description would almost always be vague, with phrases like, "And knowledge shall guide, way to the heavens." Sometimes they would be followed by other comments, but most writing seemed glitched and unintelligible. It seemed to be a history, though. The maps I sometimes found confirmed it. I simply explored, and after a while, I learned to let instincts guide my way. Soon I found the next dungeon, a large pyramid rising out of the desert, upside down. Over it, straight up to the sky, was another large upside-down temple. It stretched so far I couldn't see the top, but I couldn't keep going. I needed sleep again. The next day came, and I entered the dungeon. It was like all the small tombs I would find, only a bit more perilous. More bottomless pits, chasms, spike traps, and monsters this time. Long arms that would grab you from out of the walls like wall masters. Only these simply threw you into the traps, killing you. What probably used to be Red Deads and skeletons. At the end of this dungeon, I found a large spiral staircase. I followed it up until I reached what seemed to be the top. It took 2 hours of climbing, but the time seemed to fly by. The top was merely a platform with a large, ornate arrow pointing off an edge. Since there was nowhere else to go, I jumped. The screen again flashed white, and I was in a new area. This went on for the next few weeks. There were many places to visit, and at times I could find borders where one locale met another. I started to name the locations I had been to, but although I started knowing all the places intimately, there never seemed to be an end to new locations. Sometimes I would go through one door and come out on the other side of the world. Places didn't behave by consistent rules of space, but it became easier to find my way regardless. Each time I revisited a place, it was rearranged in a different, more navigatable setup. From every corner, though, I could see the tower in the distance. I quickly realized that I had not reached the top, only fallen into one of the many traps. In fact, I still had not reached the top. In the few times I went about the real world, I could feel that the game was different. It changed itself. It seemed to react to me. I was sure that a game like this should not have been able to be created. But then, they were going for a free roaming experience, more similar to the original Zelda. What if they succeeded? They created a world one could always roam, and they really did create a world. I had learned of many gods in that land, the 3 goddesses who had created such a perverted, physical world. The god He Who Sees, who decided to cleanse it. I still don't know my own route, but I felt that if I simply followed my instincts, I could find my goal. That's why I'm writing this now. My instincts still tell me where to go, but it's not here. It's not in the game. I have to leave, and I will do it. But before I go, I felt like I had to leave this message for someone to find. I should warn you though, it may be a game, but it knows you are playing.